In today's repair, we're reviving this iPhone 12 Pro with a shattered back glass and a camera glass that's nowhere to be seen. Surprisingly, the screen survives, although deeply scratched. This is going to be a challenge. First up, we begin by testing the phone. Right away, you can tell there's an audio problem. The sound quality is poor, and we will definitely have to address this later. Next, we begin by testing the cameras. Listen closely, there's a crackling noise coming from the cameras, and the quality is very poor. This indicates a major problem. We will have to replace this later. As always, we unscrew the two bottom screws, putting them aside for later. We place the phone into a screen opening tool, clamping it in place. Then lifting the screen slightly, we add isopropyl alcohol. We use a razor to free the screen from the adhesive. Once the screen has been lifted enough, we slide a guitar pick in between the screen and the frame of the phone, carefully moving the guitar pick around the phone. As you can see here, the screen frame has detached itself from the screen, so we have to be extra careful in order not to damage the screen. A little wiggle and we can open it up. We hold up the screen using Groot. 2 screws and we can disconnect the battery. 4 more screws and we can lift the panel and disconnect the earpiece speaker. 2 more flex cables and the screen is now free. We can set this aside for refurbishing later. Moving on to the front-facing camera, which is held in place with 3 flex cables. Carefully peel the flex cable away from the flash flex cable and we're good to go. 4 screws and we can remove the metal plate that protects our camera. Once removed, we can disconnect the camera and lift it out of place using our jimmy tool. Wow, there's a huge buildup of dirt from the camera glass being missing for a long period of time. Next, the SIM reader. First, we have to remove 2 small plates holding the connections in place. Then removing the SIM tray and the SIM reader comes out with ease. Next, we're going on to the main speaker. This comes out very easily as it's not connected with any flex cables, so it's easy to lift it out once the screws are removed. Next, the Taptic engine, which is a fancy name for the vibration of the iPhone. Remove the metal plate and then we work on removing all of the screws holding down the charging port. We've sped this up so you don't have to see the awkward angles it took to remove the screws and record this. We can now disconnect the charging port from the motherboard. This is only held in with 2 flex cables. Unfortunately, one of these flex cables runs under the motherboard, so we must take out the motherboard first before we can lift out the flex cable. Before lifting it out, make sure to peel away the last flex cable, which is held down by some tape. Lift out the motherboard and we can move on to taking out all of the small parts, 3 screws and we can remove the antenna. Next is the LiDAR sensor, which is held down by 2 screws. We pry this up using our jimmy tool. Then we remove the metal plate holding the rear mic in place. Unscrew, 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 remove metal plate. Carefully lift the flash out of place, but don't forget to remove the microphone first. Next, the battery. This is held down by adhesive strips that will need to be pulled out of place. This is a bit awkward, so don't be afraid. If you've broken any, just use some isopropyl alcohol and it'll free right up. In our case, we managed to get 3 of the strips free and 1 broke, but it was a small one so we could lift it out without any issues. Soak that charging port with some alcohol and pry underneath it using a jimmy tool. Be careful before lifting it because we need to remove both microphones before freeing it up. Using our jimmy tool again, we pry up the Wi-Fi antenna. Be careful doing this because they are very delicate and we don't want this phone restarting. Next, a small mount on the side of the phone, held in by 2 screws. Now we move on to the side buttons. They're held in by screws which are visible on the left side of the device, but on the right they're hidden behind a small piece of plastic which is easily moved out of place. We heat up the wireless charging pad, loosening the adhesive. Then, using our jimmy tool, we can lift it gently. After loosening the mute switch, this should come out with ease. There's some clips attached to the side of the panels that hold the volume buttons in place. We remove these clips and flip up the panels as seen here. We do the exact same thing for the sleep wake button. Finally, we get to remove the awkward MagSafe magnets. We want to reuse these magnets to make the phone as original as possible. As you can see here, we use a lot of heat and a small metal tool to lift up the magnets. We can now go onto our new housing and begin reassembling. We start by adding some cold press glue to hold the magnets in place. This is an awkward process and it took much longer than it looks here, but we want this to function as it originally would. Trust me, this is not a fun part of the refurbishment. We put new buttons into the housing and we hold them in place using the panels that we saw earlier. Then we add the little pins to make sure this is going absolutely nowhere. Add our small mounts, which are both held in with 2 screws. These are used to keep the screen in place. Slap on that wireless charger and put the buttons back. Screwing them all in place, we tested every button to make sure that they're clicking correctly. We don't want to have to lift everything back out if one does not function properly. We add the dust protectors. These are so small that the resolution on our video has gone down drastically. Adding our new microphone and speaker holder, more dust protectors, and we can slap the charging port back in place. And another microphone holder. And you guessed it, a lot more screws to go, so we sped this one up for you. Metal plate, taptic engine, speaker, more screws. Don't forget the small black pin. This has to be in place before adding the SIM reader or you can say goodbye to your SIM card. SIM tray, metal plate, screw, add the Wi-Fi antenna, more screws, add the microphone holder and then the thing that holds the Face ID in place. Place the flash and the microphone in place. Screw, metal plate, screw, Bluetooth antenna, more screws, and we can put the motherboard back in place, carefully moving the flex cables away from the motherboard. 3 screws holding the motherboard in place. Be careful not to overscrew these as it could damage the motherboard. Fold over the flex cable from before, connecting it in place. Connect the remaining flex cables and then at the bottom, make sure to secure them with the metal panel. Using tape, we remove the camera glass protectors. We don't want any fingerprints here. Using a metal plate, we can secure the rear microphone in place. We add the LiDAR sensor, connecting the flex to the motherboard, and then screwing it in place. Now, we add our new replacement camera. Just look at the difference between these two. Connect it up, and a quick clean before securing it with the metal plate held down by 4 screws. Place in the front-facing camera and connect it up. We don't have the original adhesive for holding the battery in place, so we may do with what we have from another iPhone model. This will hold it in place. Guided by the connection of the flex cable to the motherboard, we stick the battery in place. Now we're moving on to the screen. The earpiece mesh is very dirty, so we'll be replacing this. We're not happy with the condition of the screen, so we decided to refurbish the screen to make it like new. Firstly, we removed the earpiece and sensor with some isopropyl alcohol. We put the screen face down on the hot plate with suction. We then enter between the glass and the OLED using a thin metal wire. Back and forth movements until we can remove the glass. We add more alcohol to the OLED. This, along with the heat, makes it easy to remove the OCA using our spinny tool. We remove the earpiece mesh as we will be replacing this later. We give it a quick clean with a sponge followed by a microfiber cloth. We then hook up the screen for a quick test to make sure everything is working perfect so we don't waste materials. And as we can see, the screen is functioning perfectly. We place the OLED in our alignment mold. A clean under the green light to make sure that there's no dust on the screen. The last thing we want is to trap dust in between the glass and the OLED. We put our new mesh in place and then carefully add our glass to the OLED. Throw it into our cooker and we will come back and see the results. Our screen is now ready. Adding dust protectors around all the edges of the phone. This will make sure that no dust gets in when we seal it up. We add our earpiece back onto the screen, holding it down with screws. We then connect the screen to the motherboard with the 3 flex cables, followed by the battery. Hold them all down in place with 2 metal panels. The first with 2 screws, and the second with 4. Get that crunch? And finally, the 2 bottom screws. Now, for the moment of truth. Boot it up and peel away the protective film. A quick test of the touch functionality and then onto the new camera. Groot is looking perfect through all 3 of these lenses. Now testing the speakers. They sound perfect after replacing the mesh. Just listen. A quick clean and this phone is ready to go. Just look at the results. If you made it this far into the video, thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, it helps us out a lot. Thank you.